Good morning or good afternoon. It's Miss Bauer here, and today we're going to talk about equations of circles. So this would be, how do we graph a circle on a graph? So our formula for that is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And so using this formula right here, we're just plugging in our values, and then this is going to give us a circle. So h and k, so we'll plug in things for h and k. hk is always going to be the center, and r is going to be the radius. Now, note that if we have a center at -2, -1, if you were going to plug in -2 and -1 there for h and k, the double negative would change it to a positive. So that's just something to be careful about as we go forward with this. And you have this formula on your formula chart. It's right here. In fact, I would highlight that, circle that, put a star next to it because it's right there. And then we can see a little visual. HK is the center, and then going out, that is our radius, that's R. So if the first one has a center at 0, 0, I'm going to go ahead and label that as HK, and then my radius would be R. So the formula is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, and then I'm just going to plug in those values. So it'd be x minus h is 0 squared plus y minus k is 0 squared equals r is 9 squared. So I start by labeling, then I'm going to plug things in, and now I'm going to simplify. X minus 0 is really just x, so I'm going to rewrite that and say x squared plus y minus 0 is really just y squared, and then always simplify that radius squared, so 9 squared would just be 81. And that's your equation for a circle. So if we go to Desmos and we graph that, we should get a circle. So x squared plus y squared equaled 81. And see, I have that circle, and as I can tell, that radius is 9 and the center's at 0, 0. So that's how this works. So going back, remember, we're going to label it, plug it in, simplify it, and that's it. So the next one says that we have a center at 1, 3. So that's the HK. And so using that formula again, instead of x minus h, now I'm going to say x minus 1 squared plus y minus k is 3 squared. And if the radius is 4, that's your r, so 4 squared. Now, in this one, there's not much to simplify. Like x minus 1 squared, we're going to leave it just like that. It should look very, very similar. It should look very, very similar to our formula. We just plugged in values, but we need to be careful that we always simplify that r squared. So I'm going to rewrite this as x minus 1 squared plus y minus 3 squared. There was nothing to simplify there unless it's a 0. Equals 4 squared would be 16. So change that to 16, and then that's it. So label, plug it in, simplify. So taking a look at the next one, the center's at -3, 0. So that's my h and k. The center is always going to be h, k. And the radius is 5, so that's our r. So if I have the formula x minus h, so my formula is x minus h squared. If I have x minus, well, that's -3 parentheses squared plus y minus k is 0 squared equals 5 squared. And this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier, where if your center is a negative number, well, our formula is negative, and 2 negatives would make that a positive. So now I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. So I labeled, plugged in. I'm not going to say x minus -3. Let's just go ahead and change that to x plus 3 squared plus y minus 0 would just be y squared equals 5 squared would be 25. That's it. So I'm going to give you just a second to try this next one on your own. Label, plug it in, and then see if you can figure it out. So hopefully you were able to figure this one out. So we have h, k, and r. So when I start plugging things in, I get x minus 4 squared plus y minus negative 7 squared equals 13 squared. And then when I go through and simplify that, I end up with x minus 4 squared plus, those two negatives are going to change that to y plus 7 squared equals 13 squared would be 169. And that's it. So if we wanted to just go double check this, I can pick either one of these, it doesn't matter, and I can go graph it. So I'm going to check that bottom one, the x minus 4 squared plus y plus 7 squared. So x minus 4 squared plus y plus 7 squared equals 169. And then if I look, I can tell the center's over there around 4, negative 7. So the center's around 4, negative 7. And then if I wanted to count, I would see that the radius is 13. And I'm using Desmos to graph. That's just a way of checking it. So now we're going to go backwards. Now they have the graph, and we have to figure out the equation. So in order for me to figure out the equation, I just need two things. I need to see where is the center at and where is the radius at, and then I'm just going to follow that formula again. So taking a look at this first graph, I see that the center is at the origin, which is at 0, 0. For the radius, I can just count. And remember that make it easy on yourself, like 1, 2. That's the radius right there. Or I could go out 1, 2. Or I could go this way, 1, 2. I could go that way, 1, 2. But try not to go out at a weird angle. So the radius is 2. I like to go either up, down, or you can go right or left. So if I plug that into that formula, that would be x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals 2 squared. So once I have the center and the radius, I'm just going back up to this formula right here. Because once I have the center and the radius, I have h, k, and r. So all that I need to do is just plug it in. And then we simplify. So x minus 0 squared would make that x squared plus y squared equals 2 squared would just be 4. And that's it. And you can always go to Desmos and just graph it and make sure that your graphs match. So that's all you have to do is figure out center, radius, and then it's just back up to what we were doing before. So this one, if I look, remember I go left and then up. So this one has a center at negative 3, positive 3. And if I count that radius, it just goes 1 over. So my radius would just be 1. So I have my h, k, and r, and now I'm going to plug it in. So I have x minus h is negative 3 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals r is 1 squared. And then we simplify. So x plus 3 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 1 squared is 1 times 1, which is just 1. And that's it. So taking a look at this last one, so we have the center, it just goes up. So it's at 0 and it goes up 3. So the center is at 0, 3. To figure out the radius, we're just going to count one direction. So it doesn't matter which direction you go. I'm going to give you a minute to count. So the radius is 4. And now I'm going to plug it in. So I have my h, k, and r. So x minus 0 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 4 squared. And don't forget, we always have to simplify. So x minus 0 squared would just make that x squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 4 squared is 16. And that is it. So all of this really boils down to, can you follow the formula? So can you follow the formula? So this next one says, write the equation with the given center. So we know where the center is. The center is our HK, but then they gave us a point. So the only thing that we're missing, if we go back and look at our formula, we have our H and our K. What we're missing is R, the radius. And that's okay. We're going to go ahead and sketch this out and see if we can figure out what the radius is. So I have a circle with the center at 0, 0 and the point 3, 4. So I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, up 4. right there. So notice it's not going to be a box, it's going to be a circle. So like whatever that length is, that's going to be the radius. So it's not going to be a box, but it's going to kind of curve all around. Not like that, obviously, but it should kind of curve around. There we go. So it's going to look something like that. So I need to figure out what is the distance from here to here, and that's going to tell me what the radius is. I can't just count. I didn't put this on a real graph, so I'm not 100% positive. But I do know that I went over 3 and then up 4. So if you think way back to the triples, well, notice I have 3, 4, and then what would be the length of that radius? That would be 5. So if we put this on a real graph, so let's just go up in this one. So 3, 4 would be right here. So if I tried to just count that straight, it would be at an angle. So I'd have to be really careful. I'd have to use the 3 and the 4 to turn into a right triangle to find the radius. But we know 3, 4, 5 is really common. So now I have r. So we just figured out that the radius is 5. So r is 5. So now I can just plug it into this formula. So x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So the center was at 0, 0. So x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals, the radius is 5 squared. And whenever you simplify that, you should get x squared plus 5 squared equals 25. So even if we're missing things, being able to put it on a graph really helps. So let's do some practice with graphing. If we have x squared plus y squared equals 25, which we just did, think, what was the center of this one right here? Well, that has a center at 0, 0. And to get the radius, I'm going to square root the last number. So to get the radius, think, what's the square root of 25? And the square root of 25 is 5. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this one, and then we can just double check making sure that everything matched from the last one. So my center is at 0, 0, and my radius is 5. So the way that I like to do it is I'm going to go right 5, left 5, up 5, down 5, and then connect. So up 5, that's the radius, right 5 is a radius, down 5 is a radius, and left 5 is a radius. If I try to count this way and I try to go out 5 at an angle, it's going to be a little bit off. So now that I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and connect and try to make that into a circle. So trying to not curve it too much. I know this is really the tricky part. There we go. So going back, that point 3, 4, it said was on our graph. Well, if I go right 3 up 4, boom, there's that point right there, which is the same distance all the way around. So I did that one correctly. So taking a look at this next one, if we're going to graph it, first I need to figure out the center, which is our HK, and then our radius, which is R. Now, you might think the center is at -3, -5, but remember that our formula was a little bit backwards, so this center would actually be at 3, +5. But if these had been positive, then our center would be at -3, -5. It's kind of the opposite of what you think it is. So our center is at 3, 5, and to find the radius, I'm just going to square root that r squared. So the square root of 9 makes our radius 3. And then once you've done that, you've done the hard part. So now I'm just going to graph it. So my center is at 3, 5. So I'm going to go over 3 up 5. There's my center right there. And if the radius is 3, that means I'm going to go up from my center. So I'm going to go up 3. That's one radius. Right 3. Down 3. Left 3. And then that's enough to make our circle. That's it. So once you have the center, just remember to go up, down, right, left, and then we get our circle. Remember that you can always graph these in Desmos if you're having trouble, but you should still be able to find the center and the radius on your own. So sometimes without graphing, we want to know, is that point actually on the circle? So if we have this circle right here, so we have x minus 3 squared plus y minus 8 squared equals 100 squared, and we don't have a graph. If we were going to graph it, we know that the center should be at 3, 8, and it would have a radius that's the square root of 100, which means that the radius would be 10. But let's say that I don't want to actually graph it to know if 0, 0 is on the graph. I can just plug in those values and see what I get. And here's what I mean when I do that. Here's what I mean when I say that. We're going to plug 0, 0 in now for x and y, and then we're just going to check it. So if 0, 0 is on the graph and I plug it in, I should get 100. It should work out. So if I plug it in, I'm going to have 0 minus 3 squared plus 0 minus 8 squared, and I'm going to see if I get 100. Since we're going backwards now, we're just checking if the point is on the graph. We have the center. We're not plugging in for HK. Now we're going to plug in for XY. So 0 minus 3 squared, that would be negative 3 squared, plus 0 minus 8 would be negative 8 squared. So think, a negative and negative, we're going to make that positive. So negative 3 squared would be 9 plus 64. So 9 plus 64 is 73. Well, 73 does not equal 100, which means that that point is not on our circle. Now I could go graph it and check it, but sometimes it's easier to just plug it in and then go from there and see, does it work out, yes or no? So let's check this next one. So plugging it in, so instead of x minus 3, I'm going to say 13 minus 3 squared plus 8 minus 8 squared, and we're going to see what we get. So 13 minus 3 was 10, so 10 squared plus 8 minus 8 is 0, so 0 squared is just 0, and 10 squared is 100. Well, if it's on the circle, then we should get 100. So 100 does equal 100, which means that this point is on our graph. And I think that this sometimes is just a little bit easier than graphing and trying to look for that point on the graph. And that's how we graph circles. That's it. So just remember that formula because everything comes down to that formula, and it should be on your formula chart so you can use it. That's it for today. Good luck with your practice.